All right, well, that was a bunch of fun. I have no idea what happened with OBS. It said that it broadcasted out. I didn't leave my YouTube dashboard up, and I thought I filmed the whole 15 minutes of what I shot, and apparently I didn't. So I apologize for everybody. I thank for those who have joined in right now. Thanks for your patience and all that. Apparently, episode number 2 is a trial and learning curve and all this. So, thanks again for joining. And I actually had some comments from a couple people on first my microphone. They thought that it sounded a little muddied last time, and I think that was actually the streaming side of the equation. It was actually bringing down the bitrate quality of this. I'm hoping that the sound sounds a little bit better right now, so we'll check that out after this. Also be aware there is a podcast that gets uploaded within a couple hours of this going live. I just chop off the intro on this and upload that. So if you don't have a lot of time to watch videos and whatnot, go ahead, subscribe to the podcast. You can see it on Spotify. You can see it on iTunes and pretty much anywhere else that you get your podcasts. And somebody also had made the comment that I seemed a little wooden the last time, and part of the reason is, this is live. I don't have a script that I go off of. I actually just have on my monitor. I see my 5 or 6 topics that I list out, and that's how I go by. So I always want to try to be a little bit more animated and all that, and I hope that my voice wasn't too droning and whatnot last time. So I want to start off with some findings that I found with Serato versus Virtual DJ, and I want to kind of pour back into that topic. And I had the links to that article and video when I first put up the original stream. I'll put that in this one as well. So if you haven't taken a look or good read on that, please do so. It's a pretty involved dissection of both applications. But something that I found, and I mentioned last episode that I bought a new SSD drive to work off of. I'm thinking of using my external drives instead of just off of internal drives this year. I did find that constantly having to prune songs, while kept for a very nice and lean library, it gets a little old at times, especially if you know that a particular song that somebody's requested is on your hard drive back at home. So I'm going to give my external drive a whirl. But in doing so, I've been playing around with, just deleting the library in Serato and Virtual DJ, loading up certain things, seeing how it performs. And something that I learned over time is, number one, that Serato apparently, the way it queries a library, I think it actually queries the library fairly quickly, because it didn't matter whether I had a spinning external hard drive, so an old school, regular old rotating platters, or with my solid state drive. The load times were always identical. And I must have tried it at least a dozen times with kind of different loads on the system just to see how it would perform. And they all loaded at the same time. Another interesting thing that I found with Serato is, and I use smart crates extensively, and the more smart crates that you have, the longer it takes after you load that it is querying all the songs in its database before you can actually use it. So first you'll see the songs populate, and then you'll see little loading signs around the smart crates, and it takes time. For me, doing a 60,000 or so library and loading that in always took 1 minute. And I decided I deleted half my smart crates just because I didn't really need them anyways, but I wanted to see how the performance would be. And lo and behold, it went down to 47 seconds. So I'm sure that if I eliminated all my smart crates, that first 30 seconds that it took to load the library would that's all that it would need. So if you do use Serato and you are like me and use a lot of smart crates, be aware that the larger your library is, that it definitely adds some loading time to that. Virtual DJ doesn't seem to be bothered at all. It's definitely, if you have a larger library, the type of application to use is always 2 to 3 seconds when it loads. And again, it doesn't matter if it's an external, internal, SSD, spinning drive, they always had the same performance. So I've actually appended my Serato and Virtual DJ blog post, and I might even do a B-side video eventually. There's a few other topics people have brought up that I might do a quick 5 or 6 minute video on some of the additional things I've learned over time. But it's a very interesting thing that I had run into. Another thing that I ran into, and again, I found this with the external SSD drive that I was using. The reason I got it was my spinning drive was not operating on USB-C. And apparently the wiring scheme is actually different for the way it delivers power to some devices. And apparently external drive seems to be the most problematic of them all. I started hitting some of the forums. It just isn't the brand of drive that I was using, but a lot of other people were complaining that they weren't powering up or they were kind of flaking out if they were. So something to think about if you eventually migrate over to any MacBook Pro that's 2015 or newer. That's when they started switching over to USB-C. And I knew for myself that I wanted to eventually go SSD anyways, and prices have been coming down to pretty reasonable given how fast they are. You know, this drive is easily 5 times as fast as the spinner that I had. So old drive is still great. You can actually still plug that into a powered hub and put it in via USB-C, and that would work fine. But just the way that USB-C delivers power to some peripherals, it just won't work. So keep that in mind if you do start to migrate over, that you might run into issues like that. I had a DJ who said maybe I should start kind of a Dear Abby kind of column, or Dear Mr. DJ or whatever. But with that, he posed a question: what does, when a dad asks that he wants to do something in secret, wants a spring a surprise, what do you do? And this one's a tough one. I actually had one a few years ago in 2015 where the dad had hired this Samacha Bottle Brigade, which was basically dancing Jewish people with an elaborate dance scheme. They were dancing with bottles, go figure. And it was just an amazing segment and all that. But I was a little concerned because I knew the bride was, she definitely, I didn't think she was going to be too opposed to it, but I also knew that a kind of a surprise like this on her day may be, a little bit, shocking. So actually I did talk to her husband-to-be, and he said, no, it'd be absolutely fine. But there are some cases where the person who's springing the surprise does not want anybody to know. They want to be a complete surprise. And, there's a couple trains of thoughts on this. If the parents are paying for it, there might be a little bit more leeway to give deference to them. But on the flip side, if it ends up being that, the couple, is footing the bill, and especially if you don't think that they'll handle these kind of surprises well, I think it's at that time where you're just like, what, either you have to talk to them. I'm sorry, this is just, I do not want to create any bit of chaos or discomfort in it. Even though it might be completely awesome and innocuous, you still don't want it to be something that is a surprise, especially if you've gone through, lots of details, setting everything up, and then having the surprise again sprung up on them. So me personally, I would, if it was complete, they didn't want to talk to him at all, I would just probably say no. And that it sucks a little bit, but in the end, I'd rather maintain a good even flow and no surprises for the night. A topic on canceled artists. This has been a hot topic for a little while now, actually a few months with R. Kelly. Michael's back in the news. And the first things first, for myself, I have incorporated the question about, number one, do you mind hearing these artists being played? If something that I felt was would work in their event, or if a guest had requested it. The flip side is, I want the couples to make sure that they have deference on this. But in the same token, me personally, I separate the art and the artist. There's so many artists that had trouble pass. Elvis, you have Steven Tyler from Aerosmith, you have Miles Davis, who was a drunk. He was an abusive drunk. And this is all, this has been out there for ages. And there's so many artists that do have these kinds of problems. Elvis married, she was 14 at the time, 13 or 14. And it's just, I don't want to pollute the idea of the art that somebody puts out and try to put some type of righteousness over top of it. Because basically, if you do, there's almost no music to play. There's somebody that has some dirt in their past, or maybe it was their producer, or something has happened where that artist just is not going to necessarily sit right with certain people. And I know there's been a couple videos as of late where it seems like R. Kelly is definitely getting a little bit more heat put on him than Michael. Michael still seems to be played pretty well without issue, but some people are running into issues playing R. Kelly. So again, for me, I personally separate the art and the artists. And I do give deference to my couples to make sure that if they do have a problem, that's something I know right away, and I know whether I should be playing that or not at their wedding. I had a question actually just a few hours ago. Somebody saw one of my pictures about towing out my speakers. So I have my Evolve VV50s, and the sound that comes out of those is quite a bit different than what you would get from a normal cabinet over sub. The field of coverage is 120 degrees as opposed to 90 degrees, plus it's also partial downfiring. So the soundstage is much closer to the DJ itself. So if you have them straight on and they're close by, you can essentially get some comb filtering and other anomalies that are pretty close to the dance area, at least front and center of your booth. So when I do get these cases where I have such a compact setup and I just don't know what to do at that point, I tow out the speakers. I degree them out, 5, 10, 15, sometimes even more extreme, like 20 degrees. And that reduces that that zone where comb filtering, other anomalies can happen. It pushes it out much further. And in most cases, I haven't had a problem once I have towed them out. I definitely have had problems with comb filtering, other cancellations, just very odd muddled sounds from it. And also when you have acoustics, naturally your ceiling, if it's slanted, if you're stuck in a corner, that changes things as well. But ultimately, if I've got a really compact setup for that night, I spring out the, so I'm going to end it here. For anybody that has... So for anybody, and apparently my OBS software just actually freaked out a little bit. It showed my stream stopping and restarting again, go figure. So for anybody that that likes this material, you can subscribe to my Patreon page. It's just $1 a month. And part of the reason I put that out there is these videos, my blog posts and all that is quite time consuming to put that out there. So with that, I want to just basically create a little bit of pool. So if I have to buy a new material or some of the additional things that I do with this, it definitely makes things a little bit more worth the effort. So if you do like this, go ahead, subscribe to my Patreon page. If you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel, and a lot of people who follow me have forgotten to subscribe. And I got a lot of comments when I pushed out when I got to 300 subscribers. So please make sure hit that subscribe, ring that notification bell as well. Hopefully I do not have another problem with OBS next week, and the links that I sent out work well. But again, thank you so much for spending time watching this video. This is DJ Lou, and I will see you again next Tuesday.